If you go to the HUD Resource Exchange into IDIS, there is a link there to what is called the UAT. Bless you. Everybody's sneezing. What's going on? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. So it's IDIS UAT. It'll request that you get a special password. It's not your normal password, okay? It's still your regular login. If you have a B or a C number, okay? UAT. It's a training, yeah, it's a training module. Yeah, but I don't know what the U and A stand for. University of Auburn, maybe, I don't know. So, anybody know what it was? User assistance training, okay. So you can go in there, you get their password, you're gonna have to call the help desk, get your password, and then what happens is you can actually log in through the UAT version, and it's gonna have everything that your current system has. All your activities, it's gonna have everything. But you can go in and play with it all you want. And anything you do in there won't be saved to your regular system. But sometimes you'll think, how do I do this? And how does that? So you go in, you try it out, and you'll say, oh yeah, that worked. Okay, now I can do it on my real system, okay? Or if you want to practice on doing a drawdown or something, that's where you can go in and play with it, okay? So it's a great tool to have, okay? So the other latest revision took place, just recently because of the whole grant-based accounting system. So we've got some new screens, new way of doing certain things, okay? The main thing I want you to take from this is that IDIS is not an accounting system. It's a reporting system, okay? Which means that the financials in IDIS should not be used to do an analysis of your own accounting system. It's the opposite. You should use your accounting system to do a reconciliation of what's in IDIS, okay? Your book should be what is accurate. IDIS should be reflecting what is accurate, not the opposite way around. Every once in a while I get somebody to say, well, my IDIS says this, so I'm going to change my financials. No, don't do that. It's the opposite, okay? Very important. Yes?
I don't know if it sounds good, but what BUD is approved is what's submitted in your action plan. Mm-hmm. So that budget is actually reality, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And realistically, if that would be incorrect.
Well, when you're talking about budgets, but when you're talking about expenditures, when we're talking about an accounting system, when you're doing draws, your draws aren't necessarily, if they don't match your financial ledgers, your general ledgers, then yeah, your IDIS should match your general ledgers. In terms of budget, yeah, your budget should reflect, and your financials should reflect that too. You're right. You're right in that sense. Okay? So IDIS is HUD's management information system for the 4 CPD programs. We have ESG, we have HOPWA, we have HOME, and we have CDBG, right? It's also used for the Section 108 loan guarantee program, which is a new element. Years ago, Section 108 wasn't even on there. So, and they finally realized, well, how are we tracking our 108 loans? Well, we're not. Okay, so now let's incorporate it into the IDIS system. So now it is a part of IDIS. It's also now part of the development of your consolidated plan, your action plan, and CAPERS, right? You're using the Econ Planning Suite. This is where you input your con plan. Annually, this is where you input your annual action plan and your CAPER, right? And so now the beauty of this is as you do this, it's all kind of tying together versus before you had a paper document for your consolidated plan, a paper document for your action plan, and half the time it never matched. So by setting up your projects in your econ planning suite in that module, it automatically transfers it over to IDIS. So at the beginning of the year, all your projects are already in the system. You're now just setting up activities, okay? The objective of IDIS is to draw down funds and to collect and report on the activities that you are implementing, okay, with the CDBG funds. You basically have 4 cycles, okay? The first is the planning phase, which is where you're using the consolidated plan, you're entering your action plan. You have a delivery phase. That's where you're doing your draws, that's where you're reporting your accomplishments. You have your reporting phase, which is where you're developing your CAPER, you're submitting your CAPER. And then now you have the closeout phase, okay? So you're making sure that you're closing out all of your activities and you're closing out your grants. Okay? So this is just a screenshot. And unfortunately, some of these screenshots are not going to be, number one, clear. And number two, we've got the smallest screen that we could find. But hopefully it's good enough. If you need to move forward, there's some seats up here if you want to see the screenshots, okay? And I know the ones in your handout are not that big either. So, but these are the actual modules that we deal with in IDIS. We have admin, we have grantee participating jurisdiction, we have grant, plans, projects, activities, funding, drawdown, reports. And so just the title alone is kind of self-explanatory, right? So if I'm trying to do a drawdown, where am I going? I'm going to go to the drawdowns, right? If I'm funding a project, where am I going? I'm going to funding. If I'm doing a voucher, this is all of my financial stuff here. So I'm receiving a voucher, I'm going in there. So it's pretty self-explanatory, right? Okay. So these are the system roles. Depending on who you are, you have certain roles that you can implement. So as a user, you can plan, you can set up and manage activities, you can commit and draw funds, you can report accomplishments, and you can run reports. But you'll notice that those system roles are different than the field office staff. They can review and approve plans, they can ensure program compliance, monitor at-risk grantees and activities, and generate reports. And it's important to know that what you see in IDIS, they don't necessarily see in IDIS, okay? So they're different screens because they have different system roles, okay? This kind of gives us a real quick process of, an overview of the process. You're awarded the grant, you enter your action plan with projects into IDIS. Once those plans, your action plan is in there, the projects automatically are set up, okay? You then add or edit activities into your projects, and you're ready to go in the program year. You're going to commit the funds, you're going to draw down funds. As you have accomplishments, you start reporting accomplishments, and at the end, you're going to complete and you're going to close out the activity, okay? That's the concept. And it works that way. Okay. All right. So again, we talked about IDIS being a reporting system and not an accounting system. We track everything at the activity level, okay? And activities will take place under a project, but a project is really a high level, a very broad level category, okay? So when we talk about a project, we may be talking about street improvements, or we may have a project that's housing rehab, okay? So under street improvements, as an example, that's the project. We have 2 activities that year that we are implementing for under street improvements, okay? This is where we report, this is what we fund, this is what we do everything at this level. This is our activity, okay? And it could be 4 and 5 long, it could be 20 long for that matter, okay? If you're running, for example, implementing rehab programs, you may have a owner-occupied rehab, you may have a rental rehab, you may have an emergency repair program. Those are all under housing rehab, okay? So project is a broad category. The activities are the ones that start getting into the more detailed categories, okay? So activities are where the majority of IDIS reporting does occur, okay? Specific type of data is reported, is based upon selected IDIS matrix code. So we've been talking about making sure that the matrix code that you select is the most appropriate. IDIS, when you select matrix code, 05C, it's going to know that what you're going to be implementing, the activity, and as a result is going to migrate certain information and certain questions into certain screens that is going to ask you, okay, because you're doing 05C, you're doing legal services, I know it's going to be, and you selected your national objective as LMC, you're going to have beneficiaries, okay? So you should be collecting race, ethnicity, female-headed household, you should be collecting income data, okay? And those are the questions I'm going to ask you as you are reporting in IDIS. Compared to that, if you are then saying, I'm doing a capital improvement project, then it's going to ask you a whole different set of questions. If you're doing housing rehab, it's going to ask you a whole different set of questions. But that's because you selected the appropriate matrix code, okay? It's very important. Going back to matrix code. So these are some of the matrix code examples when setting up your activity. 01, acquisition of real property, 02, disposition. I think we already talked about using the correct matrix code. If uncertain, check matrix code use, check matrix code use with HUD, okay? Most of them are pretty self-explanatory, okay? I don't think you should have any issues with them. There are some new matrix codes, tornado shelters, you have payments of interest on Section 108 loans, payment of cost of Section 108 financing, and debt services. You remember I indicated that there's 3 manuals that I keep on the side of my desk? IDIS is one of them, and it has a lot of great resources in the appendix section, okay? So one of them is these matrix codes with the national objectives listed on the top side and the matrix code on this side. So it actually helps you determine whether that matrix code qualifies under a specific national objective, okay? So this is a document you should have, readily available every time you are setting up your activities. Okay. So the regulations for CDBG and IDIS say that data must be reported at least at the end of each program year. And when would that be? When do you think you have to report? What was that?
Depending on your cycle.
Yeah, but what is it that triggers that input of that, your accomplishments? What document are you preparing? The CAPER, right. So at the end of each program year, you're preparing your CAPER, so you must input the data at least once a year. Best practice, do it quarterly, okay? Now, ever since, as IDIS has been evolving, one of the things that happens is it notifies you when there are issues regarding timeliness, when it's activities that have not drawn in 12 months, when you have actually expended over 80% of your money and you have no accomplishments reported. Yeah, that's one of them. Yeah. So if that's one of them, the fact that I spent 80% of my funds and I haven't reported an accomplishment, I'm going to get a flag, even though it says I only have to do it once a year, okay? So we tend, my best practice in our office, everybody is required to, okay, you report quarterly. And the beauty of that is that you can establish a template, for example, that says, okay, we're running the, it's the Fit for Kids program. And we describe, okay, the Fit for Kids program is providing exercise and meals, et cetera, et cetera. First quarter accomplishments is this. And then the second quarter, all we're doing is we're going in and saying, second quarter accomplishments, this. We assisted this many youth. Third quarter is this. And then at the end, we total. And it so happens that that total better be matching all of my beneficiary data. It's a way of double checking. But it doesn't take that long, once you have that template in there, to just add, you know, a quick line, for this quarter we did this, for this quarter we did that. So it's a simple process. But the other thing is that if your HUD rep goes in and wants to see what you're doing, they can actually see that you have accomplishments already in the system. And at the end of the year, to finalize all your accomplishments in IDIS is going to take you very little time because you've done a lot of the work already up front. Okay? That's just the best practice. Okay, so when we look at IDIS, we're going to look at a couple of screens. We're going to look at the added activity screen. We're going to set up an activity. We're going to look at pages 1, 2. If you are doing an LMA activity, you will have pages 3 through 5. Okay. We're going to look at the accomplishment details, page 1 and 2. Actually, it's on the pages in IDIS. Yeah, there's actually that many pages on the screen, that many screens. Okay. As an example, I don't know why they use the edit version, but I would have wanted them to use the add, you know, we're adding a new activity, but I think they wanted to show already data in there on the screen. So I'm going to point out a couple of different items on this screen. Number one, this is the module that I'm in, okay? This is the actual page that I'm in. Most of them will have buttons both on top and on the bottom. These are action buttons. That being the most important one, because quite often you'll be working and then you want to go on to the next page and you forgot to save it. We have an expression in IDIS, and that is save and saved often. Okay? Because the last thing you need is to lose that information and have to input it again. Okay? Note that anything that has an asterisk, and I'm trying to see, so anything that has an asterisk in front of it is a required field. However, there are a few fields throughout the system that don't have an asterisk, that if you don't fill them out, you're going to get an error message. And the error messages will occur up here in red. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so wherever it has a date option, you always must use the month / date / year option. Okay, very important. Okay, those are the main items on that screen. So just so you know, that's the functionality of IDIS for those specific items. And when you're moving around, you're going to use only the system site, IDIS. Never use the browser back button. When you use a browser back button, what's going to happen for those of you who use it all the time? It's going to kick you out. Yes?
Where the grantee PJ activity ID, for my city, we put in our financial account information just so that my finance department does not get confused about which city code I'm drawing out of.
Okay.
I find it to be really helpful since I don't have a finance person in my office, just so that you can put anything in there.
Correct.
Which box is it?
The grantee PJ activity ID.
Okay.
No, not that one, the other one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
I find it really helpful. You can put anything you want in it. I just put my account number for my finance people so that they know what the heck I'm doing.
Yeah, we work with a grantee that has they call it CB number, and it's a CB 16-001, and everybody knows what that stands for. So on this screen, we've already, let's say we've done the first part of the add activity. When you get to this is the bottom part of the page, okay? You have a couple of items that you have to look at. This is your national objective. I know it's probably hard to see from the back. This is your national objective, your activity matrix code, okay? So you'll select the most appropriate activity matrix code. We're looking at 05, whatever it may be for a public service, okay? If you're using 108 loan funds, you'll indicate that up here. In this case, we're doing multifamily housing, so rehab, so that's not going to take place. This has, I think it's 14A, rehab, single. Actually, this is single, but it's actually rental. These columns I'm going to go through real quickly. So once you've set this up, okay, you go through your environmental review. If you've completed your environmental review, you'll select completed. Otherwise, it'll be ongoing. Okay. Down here, how many of you are using Heroes already? Okay, a couple of you. We'll talk about that when we do environmental reviews. But if you do, you can go ahead and select and link it to that Heroes review. Okay. And we'll talk, the Heroes Review is an environmental review process that's done using a web-based system, okay, versus a paper system, okay? Once you've completed this, then you're gonna go to Setup Detail, okay? And I'm going to point these out to you because in future slides you're not gonna see this. This is where you set up your activity, the detailed portion of your activity, okay? You're going to go into that activity and input your accomplishments in this section, so you'll select that when you're reporting accomplishments. When you're setting up, when you're funding the activity, you're going to select this button. And when you're closing out your activity, you're selecting this button, okay? So those are the buttons that you'll be using when you're working in the activity. So in this case, we're again setting up a rehab multi-unit residential, okay? And everything we put in on the first page is actually migrated to page 1 of the activity. We've already now have all this information that was obtained from the prior slide or the prior page. This is where we start putting in our national objective. We can change that. We did that actually. What ended up happening is you saw the edit version. When you actually set up your activity, it's a different screen and you're actually going in and selecting your national objective. You can change it on this particular screen on page 1, okay? You're going to list your accomplishment type and your accomplishments, okay? So here we have housing units. If it was something different, we'd click on that and change that housing units. We're proposing to do 5, okay? And then Chris on day 1, I think it was day 1, went over performance measurements, create suitable living environment. We've selected availability and accessibility. And again, these have asterisks, so they must be completed, okay? We continue on page 1, but we're going to go down some. This is where we have to add the address of the agency that is providing the services, but where they're being provided. It's not their corporate office. So if they have a corporate office that's not where they provide the services, this should be where they actually provide them, okay? In most cases, that public service agency, you'll fill this in, okay? If it's you, the city, then you'll fill this in for your agency. If it is a housing rehab program, which is what we're doing here, okay, we're going to include the address of that project. Now, apparently this is a 5-unit project, but if we were doing 20 individual housing rehabs, we would be entering 20 individual addresses here. And there's actually a button down here that it's not on the screen, but it says add another address. Okay, once we add this first one, it'll pop up. Okay. So we go ahead and input all of the information. There's also a button missing here. Once we put in that information, it's going to ask us to validate the address, okay, to see if it actually is a true address. Yes?
We don't need to add all the addresses at one point, do we? We can go back and edit later.
You can go back and add it later.
20 different houses, but we don't know which 20.
Yeah, and in fact, for housing rehab, I'll tell you what I end up doing. Because I haven't completed any, so I can't even set it up yet, right? And it won't let me go on until, well, it does, but it says you have to come back. So I'll put in the address for City Hall, knowing I have to go back and edit it, but it kind of then sets it up so I can finish setting up my activity. The first time I get a new, an actual residential unit that I rehab, then I'll go in and start editing it, okay? All right. Okay, let's continue. So remember we talked about confidentiality. So on all of your rehabs, you should select this for every property. Keep it confidential, okay? You don't need to keep it confidential when you're funding, your own agency, when you're funding, nonprofits. That should be incorporated with the exception of domestic violence agencies, okay? On here, activity purpose, what is help prevent homelessness, help homeless. If any of these apply, you'd select yes. Here, so every once in a while, you'll fund an activity with multi-year funds, right? You decided to do a street project in 2015, and guess what? When the bids came in, they came in high, and now it's 2016, and you're gonna fund it again. Your action plan, you're going to throw in another $100,000 into that street project. Well, you have to set it up as a 2016 activity, but it's still the same street, okay? You don't report twice and you don't double count. So what you do is where it says associated with another activity, will accomplishments be reported by another activity? You would select yes. And then you take your oldest one, your 2016, and you link it to your 2015 activity, okay? And what happens is you'll report your accomplishments in that 2015 activity. And it'll automatically know that this $100,000 is actually that same project. So you're reporting an accomplishment once, not twice. All right, so organization carrying out the activity. If it's you, then you'll want to include who's carrying this out, name of, or if not, if you select no, if this isn't you, then you need to define who that organization is. It's a public service agency, and you can actually select who they are, and if not, you can add them into the system. At some point you need to, if you're going to fund them, they have to be in there, and you'll have to add information, SAM's number. There's data that you have to include so that you can then add them as the organization that's carrying out that activity. And you only have to do that once, by the way, okay? Target area, if you have a specific target area, if you have a neighborhood revitalization strategy area or a specific area that you're targeting, you would indicate that here. If there's any special characteristics, it has historic preservation area, presidentially declared major disaster area, you would include that, you would check those boxes off. If you have Brownsfield activities, you would indicate that information, okay? Here, we're asking for information on one-for-one replacement. You don't know what that is yet, but we're gonna go over that this afternoon. It's the 104D requirements. Displacement, if you're displacing anybody. We talked about a revolving fund. If you're going to establish, if this activity is part of a revolving loan fund, you'd select that. Float funded, we talked about, okay? Any of these that apply, you're going to start checking them off, okay? And here it talks about the float funded. If you do the float funded activity, how you've structured it. Again, make sure you're saving your document. You move on to the setup detail page 2. This particular row, it says CDBG. This will remain gray, by the way, until you actually fund that activity. But you can't fund the activity until you complete the setup of the activity, okay? And what will happen is, I'm going to go back real quickly. You'll notice that what ends up happening is it says, ready to fund. This says yes, but if you don't complete the detail, the setup, it'll actually say no, and it won't let you fund it, okay? So this is where you input all your leveraged funds. And I can't tell you how, I can't emphasize this enough. It's important that you document and that you show leveraged dollars, okay? If you are leveraging these activities. Too often we become too lazy and we're like, yeah, I know there's some other money involved, but I'm not going to fill that out. Who cares? We now know why that's important, right? Because people don't understand that these dollars are leveraging, thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars on a national basis. So it's important that you take the time and fill this out. Your subrecipients as well, in your application form with your subrecipients, they should be telling you what they're leveraging. And you should be incorporating this into their activity. Okay. So again, you want to show all that information on here. Okay. And by the way, once you do input once you fund the activity, that number will auto-populate there. So because we're doing a housing rehab program, on page 2, it's starting to ask us information on, okay, is this a grant or a loan? We're going to provide one loan to an owner of a 5-unit multifamily project. And it's asking us about that loan. So it's an amortized loan, average interest rate, we're charging 3%, and all the information relative to that loan is going to be input there. Then it starts asking us about the multi-unit housing. Well, how does it know? Well, because we selected that on the matrix code and we indicated that it was multifamily, okay? So here it's asking us how many units at the start? We have 5. How many are occupied? All 5. How many are occupied by low mod? 3. And then it'll automatically tabulate the percentage. And then at completion, well, it's really going to be the same. We're only rehabbing. We're not adding any new units, okay? Over here, it's asking us, indicate if the activity is limited to one or more of the following. Only check these off if that's the only thing you are doing. Don't check it off because that's a part of what you're doing. So as an example, it talks about install smoke detectors. If you had a smoke detector program and that's all you were doing, then you'd select that, okay? But you're doing a lot more. The program isn't dedicated for that, okay? Oh, moving from first in, first out. Okay, so FIFO. Beginning with 2015, we've eliminated FIFO, anything 2015 and on, okay? FIFO was first in, first out. And we use the example of checkbooks. FIFO was one large checkbook. We now use grant-based accounting, which is individual checkbooks, okay? So from now on, any new grants, every grant will be its own individual checkbook, okay? Once completed, with the setup of your activity, you're going to fund the activity, okay? And we now have the ability to fund it, and you'll see that it has pre-2015, and it bundles all of your money into one checkbook. But you'll notice that when you have anything for 2015 on 2015 on, each individual year will actually be listed. Okay? Got it? So now you know what your running balances are versus pre-2015. Okay? And so as the years go on, this list will continue to grow and grow and grow. Okay? So when you create vouchers, you need to make sure that you're creating vouchers based on the grant that you're using for that particular activity. Okay? Don't mix and match, because this is where test number 2 of the admin comes in, that if you accidentally pay for 2016 admin with 2015 admin funds, you're going to expend more than 20% of your money. Okay? So be careful. Make sure you're tracking everything on the correct program year. Pre-2015 funding source vouchers will be dispersed on FIFO, so there's still, anything before 2015 is still using the FIFO. Eventually all that will be wiped out. Okay? But anything post, make sure that you're posting it to the correct program year. Okay? So we move on to the accomplishment. Remember, we talked about the different columns. We're going to hit the accomplishment button. This is where I was telling you that every year you must report your accomplishments, okay? Even if you did nothing. And there are projects that take 2 and 3 years. So you may say, here it has the example of 2009. So 2009, we prepared the architectural drawings and civil engineering drawings. 2010, you'll select, hey, we started construction. We're 3/4 of the way done. 2011, hey, we completed the project. So every year, and that'll show up in your IDIS and your reports in your PRO3. It'll actually indicate every single year and what you accomplished in each year. Okay? So it's important that you fill that in every year. And again, it doesn't have to be a thesis project, but make sure that you have sufficient information in terms of what you did that program year. Okay? And then any accomplishments, and we'll talk about, I won't have it here, but if you have multi-years, how many did you complete that year? And if you have multifamily and you completed 3, you'll report 3 accomplishments for that year. And then the next year when you finish the other 2, you'll report the other 2 accomplishments. And in your narrative, you should indicate that. So here, for example, it does say, we used to rehabilitate 3 of the 5 rental units, the emergency rehab program for program year 2009. Okay?
So when you complete the next 2 in 2010, do you pull the drop down and put it back to 2009 because that's the program year you're reporting on? Or?
No. You will actually report in 2010 and you're going to say, we completed 2 units. So when you print out the report, the PRO3 is going to say 2009 completed 3, 2010 completed the 2.
Still belong to 2009.
Still belong, yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is just your accomplishments, what you did each year, because each year you should be reporting what you did for every open activity. Okay? Accomplishment detail, again, it talks about race, ethnicity. Make sure that you input the information correctly. We were talking about 3 that we completed. So we have 2 white, 1 black African American. So these add up to what we had in our narrative. 1 Hispanic. By the way, these will automatically auto-populate based on the data you have here. These numbers should all match what you have up here. So we have a total of 3. We have a total of 3 on the income level. If you don't, it's going to give you an error message. Okay? Same thing here. We're talking about how many affordable units. So you're just going in and filling these answers. We had 3 affordable units, 1 that was a Section 504, which is an ADA type unit. Again, complete this and be as thorough as you can. Okay? Ensure that the data is reported on a timely fashion. Consistency of data is very important. Okay? Avoid duplicative information. Inaccurate counts of jobs created, missing income level. Again, make sure it is complete. I can't tell you how often I see capers that are deficient. I'm looking at the reports, the PRO3, I look at the PRO2 and I'm going, something's not right, okay? It's not, there's information that's missing. What was that? So, project privacy, okay. So make sure privacy of households, enter physical addresses, report, this is very important. So if you're doing economic development, every address, every business that's assisted is one activity, okay?